What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton has just found the key that could return it to the top of world motoring, and has done so in the circuit where it all started? What has really discovered in SF-25? Silverstone, Friday, July 4, 2025. A date apparently more in the Formula One calendar, but that could mark the competitive rebirth of one of the greatest legends of modern motoring, Lewis Hamilton. In his homeland, under a typically changing British sky and with the stands full of red flags with the rampant horse and banners that remembered their golden years in Mercedes, the seven-time world champion met again. This time, not dressed in the traditional silver of the Silver Arrows, but with the iconic red of Ferrari, a change of team that had generated more questions than certainties since its announcement at the end of 2023. Until that time, its adaptation to SF-25 had been an arduous process, full of frustrations, inconsistencies, and internal doubts. From the start of the season in Australia to the last previous race in Austria, Hamilton had shown flashes of his talent, but always conditioned by a car that seemed to have a personality incompatible with his driving style. Each attempt to tame it seemed to an invisible wall, a technical and sensitive barrier that prevented him from connecting emotionally with the car. But in Silverstone, everything changed. In the first free training session, Hamilton not only led the times with a 1:26,892 turn, the fastest of the day, but transmitted a completely different sensation. His body language, his radio communication, even his way of taking the rapid Beckett's curves or the braking in stow. Everything spoke of a pilot who was finally inside the car and not fighting against him. The difference was palpable. There was a fluidity in his driving, a naturalness that had not been seen since its dominant time between 2014 and 2020. The paddock noticed it. Rival engineers began to observe Ferrari's performance more closely. Some even wondered if the SF-25 had received some unnoticed secret evolution, but the reality was even more powerful. There were no new improvements. What happened was a mental, technical, and emotional adjustment. It was Hamilton who changed, who understood something that until then had escaped. A mechanical and personal harmony that emerged in the most symbolic place possible. The track that saw him debut in 2007, where he achieved his first pole, and where now, 18 years later, he wrote a new chapter in his legend. The atmosphere in Ferrari's box also reflected this new air. The engineers watched him with renewed respect. His words were measured, but the subtext was clear. They had seen something special. Even Charles Leclerc, until then the most comfortable pilot with the SF-25, acknowledged that Hamilton had taken an important step. It was not a simple quick lap that we had just witnessed. It was a warning, a turning point, a spark that could light an unstoppable bonfire if it was maintained. The important thing here is not only the time marked in the timesheet. The crucial thing is the moment in which it occurs, the symbolism behind, and what it represents for the rest of the championship. Because what Hamilton found in Silverstone was not just a good configuration or a success in tire pressure. What he found was his point of contact with SF-25. A late communion, but that could change everything. The technical narrative of this second act is sustained on a pillar as intangible as decisive. The deep understanding of a Formula One car does not always be born from a new aerodynamic component or an instant improvement of power, but of the point where a pilot and his machine finally speak the same language. That was exactly the case between Lewis Hamilton and the SF-25 in Silverstone. The famous hidden advantage that he spoke himself was not a new piece installed in secret or a revolutionary motor map. It was an existing configuration that, for the first time, worked exactly as he needed. And the most amazing thing, that configuration was already in the car from Austria. Ferrari had introduced a new flat background weeks before, with improvements aimed at expanding the operating window of the car. The idea was clear. Not winning half a blow, but making the car cease to be a capricious instrument and became a predictable and flexible platform. What Diego Tondi, chief of aerodynamics of Ferrari, and Loic Serra, technical director, designed was not a solution to fly in lines, but to stabilize the behavior of the SF-25 in the most critical situations. The deep braking, the transfer of weights in slow curves, and the traction when leaving medium curves. That is, the three areas where Hamilton suffered. And yet, that improvement had almost unnoticed in the hands of Leclerc. Not because it would not work, but because Leclerc, with its most aggressive style on the front axle and its survival tolerance, had never had problems in those areas. Hamilton, on the other hand, had been in a constant fight against a car that did not respond predictably to its inputs. Until Silverstone found the key, it was not about adapting the car to it, but to adapt its approach to the new logic of the car. That is what made the difference. During Friday's practice, Hamilton and his technical team worked in small variations in driving height, aerodynamic balance, and braking distribution. But the real jump came when they adjusted the rake parameters and rigidity of the rear train, which allowed the car to keep a stable platform when braking and turning, just what the British needed to recover confidence. The improvement was progressive but evident. Each stint was faster than the previous one, not for more power but for more control. For the first time, Hamilton felt that he could anticipate the car, who understood his reactions, that dominated him instead of improvising constantly. On the radio, his tone also changed. Of the classic frustrated corrections of the previous Fridays, it happened to phrases like, "Here is the car," and "I feel that the balance is inside." It was not rhetoric. It was the real manifestation of a pilot who stopped navigating blindly and began to read the land as a family map. This trust is not only emotional, it translates directly into tense by return. A car that does not inspire confidence forces you to stop before, not to risk so much in traction, to distrust the side grip. When the SF-25 finally offered that trust, Hamilton was able to explore its limits. And he found them. At a technical level, this reveals something fundamental. Many times, the developments of a modern car do not give immediate results, not because they do not work, but because they require a decoding process that is only achieved with kilometers, tests, errors, and sensitivity. In the case of Hamilton, it was 6 months of work until he could understand that what Ferrari offered him was not a poor car, but a sophisticated tool that had not yet been used with the proper approach. Now that Hamilton has accessed that performance window, the rest of the grill must pay attention. Because if the British can replicate this understanding in other circuits, if you can build on this base, Ferrari will not only have 2 fast pilots, but one of the most complete and dangerous of the championship operating at its optimal level. And that, in a season where McLaren and Red Bull already show signs of vulnerability, can completely change the power axis of the 2025 World Cup. What happened in Silverstone cannot be interpreted only as a specific improvement in Lewis Hamilton's performance. The magnitude of the technical and psychological finding that occurred that Friday transcends the British pilot. It is a structural shaking for Ferrari and, by extension, for the entire Formula One championship in 2025. Hamilton's discovery, the understanding of how to unlock the performance of the SF-25 under a different philosophy than that of Leclerc, reconfigures the internal dynamics of the Maranello team. From now on, there is no single way to squeeze the car. There are 2, and both can coexist. During the first part of the championship, Ferrari had operated as a functionally mono-organic team. Leclerc was the reference. His sensations, his piloting style, his tuning preferences were the axis on which strategic and technical decisions were developed. Hamilton, with his meticulous approach, with his need for a more predictable and stable platform, was the pilot who tried to adapt, but did not mark the beat. That situation is now broken. Silverstone's Friday marks the exact moment in which Hamilton ceases to be the pilot in the process of adaptation and becomes a real contender. This change of internal status not only implies a performance parity, but also forces Ferrari to reassess their technical priorities. SF-25 can no longer develop only depending on the Leclerc feedback. The car, with its multiple faces, has shown that it can be competitive under 2 different pilot philosophies. And this has direct implications in the evolution program. Suspensions, motor mapping, thermal management, including the approach of simulations in Maranello, must now consider a double parameter. That complicates but also strengthens the team. And then there is the championship. With McLaren leading in builders thanks to the consistency of Norris and Piastri, and with Red Bull in a clearly vulnerable phase after the fall of Liam Lawson and the stability problems of RB21, Ferrari has a single window. An opportunity to not only add podiums, but to attack the championship. Hamilton's understanding about the car can be just what they needed to turn theory into results. They are no longer only quick in classification or dangerous in favorable circuits. Now they have, at least potentially, 2 sharp weapons for each race. This turning point does not occur mid-season by chance. Great Britain's GP is the 12th date of the calendar. Circuits are left ahead where Ferrari has historically been strong: Monza, Hungary, Mexico, and others where traction and stability are fundamental. If Hamilton maintains the connection he found in Silverstone, if he manages to repeat this level of precision and confidence in more extreme conditions such as Singapore or Brazil, then the pilot championship also is again on the table. This discovery, this hidden advantage of the SF-25 that has finally been revealed thanks to its persistence, is not just a technical weapon. It is an emotional, psychological, strategic tool. He gives Hamilton something he urgently needed: control. And in Formula One, control is power. Being able to attack without fear, power to influence the internal decisions of the team, power to change dynamics that seemed immovable. He is no longer the second pilot in a strange car. Now it is a threat to everyone, in each race, in each lap. Can Ferrari hold this competitive duality without breaking inside? How will McLaren and Red Bull respond to this unexpected change in the balance of forces? Now it's your turn. Do you think what we saw in Silverstone was the beginning of Hamilton's true return at the head of the championship?